those who were great and righteous, such as the patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, even they didn't have the complete dimension of Torah that the Jewish people received at Sinai. And as we read the story of Matan Torah, it's a very dramatic story. The mountain was billowing with fire, with smoke, and the sounds and the sights. It was as all of creation was involved in this particular moment of God giving the Jewish people the Torah. And one wonders, why is it necessary to have such huge drama? This incredible light and sound show to accompany God giving the Torah. Why couldn't it be done in a quieter way, in a simpler way? Why was it necessary for all of creation to respond, to react in the way that it did? And the answer is, as I said before, because there was a major breakthrough at the moment of Matan Torah, a breakthrough that didn't exist up until that point. And that was that there was a very definite division between the upper worlds and the world here below. And the two did not interact directly. And this is why the mitzvot that generally fall into a physical category, we put on physical tefillin made out of leather, lulav and etrog. Whatever the mitzvot that we do, almost every single one of them translates into some physical material action. And by the patriarchs, if they had the Torah, it was that way. They used symbols to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin and symbols to fulfill the mitzvah, every mitzvah. It was not something which remained, in a sense, holy, such as tefillin, or during the 8 days, the 7 days, the lulav and etrog, etc., etc. The higher worlds and the lower worlds intermingling. And we all know that. We discussed that a number of times. But it goes beyond that as well. Torah is known as Chachmato Yitbarach. It's known as the wisdom of God. And if we stop for a moment and we consider, well, the greatness of God, even in human terms, which give very little understanding into what God is and who God is, nonetheless, we can imagine that a being who brought us into being, and a being that's so much greater than ourselves to, well, the infinite to the infinite degree, we talk about his wisdom, and he is giving that to human beings. Obviously, he's giving that to the physical world. This is a time of tremendous, tremendous upheaval. And this is why it's important for us, as we prepare for Shavuot, it's important for us to understand what in fact is really taking place. What role do we play in terms of preparing ourselves and the world for this annual yontif of receiving the Torah, and what it means in practical terms to prepare ourselves for the receiving of the Torah. We know the story. The Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim, they came out of Egypt, and the purpose of coming out of Egypt was to serve God at that mountain, to receive the Torah. And the Torah tells us that for 49 days, they counted each and every single day until they received, they stood at Sinai. And this is why we have the preparation of the Sphira period right now, where we count each and every single day. And as we know, each and every single day is represented by a particular combination of the emotional structure of the human being, as it is in the higher realms in the Sphirot. Sphirot means counting. Sphirot are the higher elements in the higher worlds, etc., etc. And this is the process of going through, getting ready for Matan Torah. But as we also know, it's very difficult for us to actually understand the particular composition of this mystical dimension on a daily basis, and even less so in terms of 49. The custom in Chabad is, every Yom Tov we have a particular mode of greeting. When it comes to Pesach, we say, Chag Kasher v'Sameach, may it be a joyous and kosher Yom Tov, for all sorts of reasons. In Chabad particularly, when it comes to the festival of Shavuot, the mode of greeting is, it should be Kabbalat HaTorah, b'simcha u'b'pnimiyut. It should be receiving the Torah with joy and with inwardness. And while, of course, it's relatively easy to understand what those terms really mean, joy is joy, inward is to make it something which is personal, real within our own lives. It shouldn't be an event that we commemorate something that took place in the past, but we have to feel the joy. There has to be the sensation of joy. And there also has to be pnimiyut. We have to take it within ourselves to see how Torah applies in a very real and relevant manner into every single area of our lives. But it goes deeper than that. Why these two particular terms? And the Rebbe was very careful whenever he greeted somebody before a Shavuot. The mode of greeting was b'simcha u'b'pnimiyut, emphasizing these two dimensions. This is what Kabbalat Torah is all about. That's one point. The second point, when we see in the Torah the preparation for this monumental moment of counting the 49 days, the Torah tells us something which is very strange. It says, you shall count 49 days, and when you finish counting these 7 complete weeks, which of course is 49 days, you will have counted 50 days. First of all, although the Torah was given on the 50th day, we don't count the 50th day. So what does Torah mean when it says you shall count 7 full weeks, and it will be as if you have counted 50 days? And again, the obvious answer is that even though we ourselves, human beings, are able to count 49, as I'll soon explain, the 50th day, this comes from God himself. This is something which man on his own cannot reach. But Torah guarantees that if in fact we properly count the 49 days, and counting is not only counting, but as I've mentioned in the past, counting also refers to purifying, to make something like a sapphire, a sapphire, then you will have, in a sense, counted. You will receive from God the dimension of 50 as a result of the human effort that you put in. You've done whatever you can as a human being. You've exhausted your human capacity. And therefore God says, I am now going to give you something which is way beyond you, something which you could never reach on your own, the dimension of 50, etc., etc. And as I have spoken about a number of times, the function of the Sfirot, the interaction between the Sfirot, each and every single day, we have one of the 49 dimensions, etc., etc. But when we take a look in the Hasidic and Kabbalistic writing, when we talk about these 49 days of counting, that each one has its own identity, each one has its own construction and composition, it is referred to as Mem Tet Sha'arei Bina. It is referred to as the 49 dimensions or stages of gates of Bina, of understanding. Within the intellectual structure, in the higher worlds, and even in the human being, we know there are 3 intellectual dimensions: Chachma, Bina, Vadat. Chachma is wisdom, that point of, well, intuition almost, a flash of insight, which is in a dot form, in a point form, which contains everything within that point form. And Bina is the expansion, the analysis, the understanding. We take each and every single spark of wisdom, of Chokhmah, and we stretch it out and we understand it from different points of view. And we are told there are 49 gates of Bina in order for us to fully and completely understand what is contained within that dot of Chokhmah. And as I've said, that imagine again the geometric dot, which is there, but it has no width and it has no length. It cannot be measured at all. It's beyond measure. But for those of you who studied a bit of geometry will know that we know that there's a dot there because no 2 points, no 2 dots can occupy the same space. It's one of these miraculous physical existences that on the one hand has space because no other dot can occupy the same space, but it has no space because it can't be measured in terms of length or width or depth or anything. And this is something which boggles the mind. It boggles the mind of the greatest mathematicians as well. How much more so in a spiritual sense, that Chokhmah is like the geometric dot. And what is Bina? The expansion of that dot. What does the expansion of that dot mean? The expansion of that dot refers to every construction. You can make a circle, you can make a square, you make, well, every type of construction, not only with straight lines or curved lines, with zigzag, every possible type of construction. How many can you make? You can make an infinite amount. Bina has 49 gates. And these 49 gates, when entered properly and counted properly and understood properly, this will bring us to the full understanding of what Chokhmah contains. Now, it's not that the dot is X and Bina is 40 times X, 49 stages. It's way beyond that. Now imagine a jigsaw puzzle. A jigsaw puzzle that's made up of 49, well, different little pieces and difficult ones. And you think to yourself, once I get all those 49 pieces, then I get the whole thing. That's not the way Bina and Chachma works. Bina is 49 jigsaw puzzles, one on top of the other. And it's not as if when you finish one, you're given the pieces for the second. And when you finish the second, you're given the pieces for the third. You're given all couple of thousand pieces for all the 49 jigsaw puzzles. And it's not as if each one is a square or horizontal or vertical, or it can be in zigzag, it can be in circles, it can be in all sorts of shapes. And therefore, logically, it's very difficult to put together, but it goes beyond that as well. It's not only 40 times 49, 49 times 49, which is 2,000 odd. It's 49 to the 49th power. And that brings you into the trillions. So we can imagine how difficult it is to actually exercise Bina. When you take one or two or three gates of Bina and you fully understand them, that makes you a man of great intellect, of great, great intellect. Can you imagine all of that? And we are told by the coming of Mashiach, all those 49 levels will have been completed, purified, transformed into something which is good, and we will reach, so to speak, the 50th dimension, which is a gift from God. This is something which boggles the mind, because we're talking about numbers that we have no concept of. Yes, we have the terms, the words to talk about them, but for us to actually imagine the numbers that come about as a result of a simple mathematical equation, 49 to the 49th power. And each one of those details is absolutely vital and fundamental in order to complete the entire structure of 49. Now, Bina is, as you know, Chachma is on the right-hand side, Bina is on the left-hand side. And what is below Bina? Below Bina is Gevura. What is Gevura? Gevura is limitation, intense limitation. And now when you're trying to understand something in detail, as you understand one detail, you realize that there are hundreds of other details. The more you apply Gvura to Bina, you realize there are more and more and more and more dimensions as you go along, because Gvura has that capacity. Gvura has the strength, the power of taking this incredible Chachma, which is a dot, and expanding in height, in depth, in width, in length, in every single possible dimension. And you get these billions and trillions of details that actually were encompassed and contained within the original dot, because this is what Bina, understanding, is all about. I can give you information, I can tell you terms, but in order for one to understand that, takes a tremendous effort in terms of intellectual exercise. And we are told that these are the 49 gates of Bina, which the Jewish people had to complete before the 50th day, the day that they received the Torah. In other words, the Jewish people had to go through this incredible journey, not only a physical journey of X amount of kilometers, but a spiritual journey. And not only 7 times 749 as we have, beginning with Chesed Shebechesed and ending with Malchut Shebemalchut, but in fact, far beyond that, this incredible, I wouldn't say infinite, but certainly limitless amount of details that they have to correct and they have to perfect. Now, why does Bina have to do that? Why is it necessary for us to go through that process, either individually in a limited way, or collectively, the Jewish people from the time they left Egypt until they came to Sinai, or historically, collectively for the Jewish people, millions and millions and millions of Jewish souls throughout the ages, each one perfecting another dimension or two or three, based upon your spiritual capacity and status? Why was it necessary? Why is it necessary for the Jewish people to go through that experience in order to receive the reward of the 50? Something which on their own they cannot. The best they can do is to correct the 49 dimensions, which, as I said, is pretty near infinite, to receive the 50, which is way beyond them. Why is all of this necessary? On the one hand, as we explain in Chassidut, to create a vessel. A vessel. This vessel has to be so powerful. This vessel has to be so strong. This vessel has to be so pure that it's able to receive the wisdom of God. Put the wisdom of God in an imperfect vessel, it won't fit. It won't be contained. The vessel will simply explode because it has not been perfected. It has not been tailored to receive this incredible, incredible input. What has to happen is that this particular vessel that has to contain the wisdom of God, the wisdom of God himself, has to be so perfect. And how is it perfected? It's perfected by each one of the details that it contains, perfected, so that it's able to receive the 50th, which is way beyond. But why is it necessary to go through this whole process? Yes, to make a keli. But why do we have to have this type of keli? In order to receive the 50th dimension, in order to receive the Torah, and of course, by extension, ultimately, Mashiach will bring to us a new dimension of Torah as well. And the answer is, as we've studied a little bit in the past, that Bina is heavily influenced by Gevura. And what's underneath Gevura? Underneath Gevura is the third level of the Sfirot, which contains Tiferet. Bina has a great desire to ensure that its work and its reward is handed first to Gevura and then to Tiferet, so that Tiferet could pass it on in order to bring about a state of perfection, which is a state of new birth. Tiferet communicates to Yesod, as we talked about in the last few weeks. Now, how does that happen? Where does Bina get the strength to do that? And where does ultimately the lowest level, Yesod, have the power to receive that incredible, incredible gift and strength of reproducing into that higher level of the 50th, the monarchy of God, the Torah of God, the coming of Mashiach, etc., etc. And the answer, of course, is because Bina is not only influenced by Gevura, Bina is also heavily influenced by Keter, the crown. And as we spoke about, the crown is above the head. It's even higher than the skull. That even though Chachma is the highest of the 10 Sfirot, on top of that is the skull, and on top of that is the crown. And the crown, because it is something which is absolutely infinite and is not at all limited, even by definition, such as the other 10 Sfirot are, it contains the power of actual infinity that it's able to infuse into each and every one of those Sfirot. It receives the power of Keter, it receives the power of the throne, and therefore it's able to communicate. Bina is able to communicate that infinite power once Bina has gone through the process of completing the 49 refinements. It passes it to Das, who passes it to Tiferet. This is what the purpose of a Bina is all about. And why Bina? Because as I spoke about, Chochmah is, in Kabbalistic terms, Chochmah is the father, Bina is the mother. And the mother has a greater concern and a greater selfless dedication to bringing the offspring into being far more than the father. The father is involved physically for a short while, whereas the mother has to carry the child to the time of birth, etc., and goes through the difficulties. Where Bina has the capacity of mother, and mother therefore has the incredible desire to fulfill the purpose of birth, much more in a sense even than the father, although without the father it cannot do it. The father contains the seed of Chachma, but nonetheless Bina as mother has this incredible need and urge in order to fulfill. And this is why, although Chachma is closer to Keter, for some reason it doesn't have the desire to bring down Keter, so it's able to communicate it further into the lower level of Tiferet and ultimately into Yesod. But the mother, who is so concerned and so dedicated and so selfless, she has that power, and this is why she is able to achieve that incredible thing. Now, what is Keter really all about? As I mentioned before, Keter is a divine level, or the level of Sfirot, that has no definition whatsoever. And once it has no definition whatsoever, it is something which applies equally in every single situation. Now, what do I mean by that? When God created the world by giving of his light, by giving of his divine revelation in two different ways. And there are two terms which appear very often in Hasidic and Kabbalistic thought, and that is Or HaMemale ve'Or HaSovev, excuse me. What is Or HaMemale? Or HaMemale is a divine revelation that is tailored for the specific area in which it's going to be revealed. For instance, in the Zohar we read that just as the soul fills the body, so does God fill the world. In other words, in addition to everything else that God is, he's also the soul of the world. Now, what's the purpose of the soul? The soul has 5 levels: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. We'll talk about that some other time. But fundamentally, what is the purpose of the soul in relationship to the body? The soul gives life to the body. But the way the soul gives life to the body is in two different ways. Something which is called chayut klali, a general type of life, and something which is called chayut prati, a specific type of life. The soul possesses within itself these two dimensions. What is the specific type of life? The specific type of life is divided according to the specific needs of the body. The level of the soul that has these specific gifts divided into 10, for instance, the power of sight. It gives life to the eye. What gives life to the eye? It has to be the vessel, the eye itself, but also the divine energy that the soul possesses that contains the power of sight. And similarly with the ear, and similarly with every single organ in the body. And if, God forbid, the soul would send the power of sound into the eye, or vice versa, if it would send the power of sight into the ear, you won't see and you won't hear. Because it's the combination of the vessel, the actual organ, the eye, the ear, etc., every single organ. The light of the chayut prati, the specific life, has to be directed specifically toward that. But then there's a higher level of life that the soul possesses, and that's called chayut klali. Now, what is chayut klali? Chayut klali is the sense of life, not as divided according to specific functions of specific organs in a specific sort of way, but the very fact that a person who is alive, you take an infant of 1 year, and you take an individual of 100 years. This one has 100 years of life, and this one has a year or even a moment of life. As far as specific dimensions of life, there's a huge difference between the infant and the one who's 100 years. The 100 year has wisdom, the 100 has experience, all sorts of things that the 100 year the infant doesn't have. But the fact that they are alive is equal. He is alive, he is alive, she is alive, she is alive. There is no difference in terms of life. In specific areas of life, huge differences, very detailed differences. But as far as the chayut klali is concerned, because it's far more infinite, it's equal in the life of the infant and the life of the older person. And the Chassidut explains furthermore, where does the center of life power enter into the human body? Into the brain. And the brain communicates to each and every single organ, to the heart. So even though the brain is far more developed and refined than the heel of a person, that's as far as a specific life is concerned. But as far as general life, that it's alive, there's no difference between the brain and the foot. They're one and the same. Why? Because life is not defined in limited ways. Life is a general sense. He's alive, or God forbid, he's not alive. the instant before a person passes away. And in halachic terms, it's called a goses. He's at the last moments of life. He's no less alive than at the height of his life. As far as his koach is concerned, as far as his strength is concerned, as far as the function of his organs is concerned, a goses may be, well, nothing works properly anymore. But as far as life is concerned, he's absolutely alive as a person at the height of his strength and power. Now, this is a long, long discussion because there are all sorts of gradual divisions between the different levels of the specific life dimension, and there is a whole series of Hasidic thought essays written by the previous Rebbe in the year 1948, where he speaks about that at great length. But that's a study that takes a couple of years. Equally so, when God brought the world into being, and the four worlds, and in each world there are infinite amount of dimensions spiritual. Each area of each one of those worlds has a specific chayut prati that's called Or HaMemale, the divine light, which is specifically tailored for and given to a specific dimension of all of creation. And therefore you cannot compare that type of memale at its lowest level in our physical world as to in the higher world of Atzilut, the higher worlds of the infinite dimensions. Over there is so much more of that light. And over here, there's so much less. It's far more contracted and limited through Tzimtzum. But then there is something called Or HaSovev. What is Or HaSovev? It's translated as the transcendent. Well, I don't know, but these English translations are very, very limited. But this is a divine light that exists in every single world equally. It doesn't matter the highest of the high, way beyond the world of angels, or the lowest of the low in this physical world that we live in. That divine revelation is equal. Why? Because it's infinite beyond any type of description. It's also hidden. We don't feel it. We don't see it. But it's there. And this is what gives the general chayut to the entire world. I know this is a complicated concept, Or HaMemale and Or HaSovev, the specific divine light for each and every world, and the specific power that each and every organ possesses in the human body, and the parallel of the higher one that is infinite. Keter is the closest thing that has a name from the world of Sovev. And this is why Keter can and does exist at every single level. It's not limited by the definition of Chokhmah or of Bina, of understanding, wisdom or understanding. It's not limited by the definitions of Chesed and Gevura, which have their own very real identities, etc., even though there's a harmony and intermingling, nonetheless, each one has its own specific. This goes way beyond identity, way beyond any type of specific. It is infinite. And this is why Keter is the... So what is Bina trying to do? Bina knows that with the best intentions of the specific powers, where every single organ in the human body is functioning at absolute perfection, there's one thing it cannot do: it cannot reproduce no matter how much it wants. It needs the power of Keter to ensure that this, in fact, can take place. Because even though potentially the specific organs might have their powers, and potentially they can do something, but actually they cannot bring out of physical into spiritual. You cannot create life out of physical things. And this is why in the blessing of Asher Yatzar that we say, after using facilities, we go to the bathroom, we go to the toilet, we say, Mafli Lahazot. There has to be a pella, something wondrous, something which is way beyond understanding. Yes, we know we can understand the human body and the way it has this and ventricles, that veins and organs, and they function and they interact, and this opens and this closes. We can understand all of that. What we can't understand is how the power of the spiritual can actually manifest into physical. This is a pella. This is, even in terms of God's wisdom, a wonder. It's beyond any type of defined structure. So what we have over here is the power of Bina desperately wants to take Keter and to infuse Keter throughout the entire structure so that it has this wondrous power and energy to energize that which is below it and ultimately create the story of birth. This is the incredible desire of what Bina is all about. And when Bina actually fulfills its own process of taking care of, can you imagine taking a concept and understanding every single detail? Every single detail. How much more so from Chachma to Bina? When Bina reaches that type of perfection, it has the power of drawing down from Keter, introducing it into Dat, which gives it to Tiferet, etc., etc., etc. This is what the 49 days, the journey from Egypt to Sinai was all about. It wasn't only counting days and purifying oneself and making sure that one was ready to receive the Torah on a logical, physical, even spiritual dimension, but to create a perfection of Bina, the Memtet Sha'arei Bina, the 49 gates of Bina, which created this new type of vessel into which the infinity of God's Torah could go. And this is why all of creation reacted, because it didn't have that process of purification. It experienced something, but it was explosive, it was light, it was fire, it was billowing smoke. All of creation, whereas the Jewish people stood next to the mountain almost in silence, they said, they achieved a tremendous sense of, what does God say? You will count 49 days. You will create this perfection of Bina. I will give you 50. I will give you my wisdom. I will give you my Torah. And ultimately, of course, we wait until the coming of Mashiach so that the universal 49 dimensions can be completed and fulfilled so that we can receive Mashiach when Mashiach comes. And this is why, when it comes to Shavuot, what do we say? We say it should be b'simcha u'b'pnimiyut. It should be with joy and inwardness. Why joy? Because we say, Eim habanim smecha. The mother is joyous, the mother of children is joyous. The mother was given a particular dimension of joy that enables, well, she sees the result of the birth, etc., etc., and her joy is far greater. Eim habanim smecha. Who is the aim? Who is the mother? Bina. Bina in its perfect state, understanding in its perfect state is the ultimate joy. What is Pnimiyut? Pnimiyut is not only perfecting each and every single detail. That's a great achievement. That's an incredible achievement. Pnimiyut means we're the highest of the high, where Keter is encouraged by Bina through its own process of purification to actually come down, to take that infinite revelation of God and to enter into each and every single one of the spirot until the birth can take place. And this is why we say v'simcha u'b'pnimiyut, not only joy and inwardness, these are nice words, but ultimately means the true inwardness is that there is no separation or division between the highest of the high and the lowest of the low on a conscious level. That's when Keter appears into every single area. And this is what Kabbalat Torah is all about. Kabbalat Torah is not only a time that we acknowledge God giving us the Torah. Kabbalat Torah, we see an incredible process taking place, and we try to, in a sense, apply it to our own lives as well. And this is, by the way, one of the reasons why the Jewish people were sleeping when God arrived in the morning, but we'll talk about that. Hopefully next week we'll give another shiur, because there's other things I want to talk about in terms of preparing for Shavuot. But please God, we'll talk about why they slept. We'll talk about how the mimale, the limited revelation of godliness, and the infinite revelation to the world, and how it brings about the state of perfection when the two of them are united, one being hidden, one being revealed in the ultimate revelation that will come with Mashiach. But to a limited degree, we're able to understand aspects of that here and now. So I hope I wasn't a little bit too abstract. And I'm talking about concepts which are a bit difficult to understand and to fathom. And as I said, Chassidut is full of these ideas and takes lifetime to study. So I encourage each and every one of you, in addition to these general shiurim, to find a shiur from here and there, once in a while, on a steady basis, to understand the Hasidic concept as they take the Kabbalistic ideas and make them reasonable and rational. So there we are. We'll notify you when the Shiur will take place next week, probably on the Sunday as well. And you should all have a good and wonderful week and have good things to share with each other and good news to report and healing and joy and purpose in every sense of the word. All the very best.
Could you see how many people were there? Just keep going. Each one is 9, 18, 27. And the first one, so about 36 families.
Thank you.